I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about secrets and lies.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching Tetsuo, the Iron Man. Andrew, you came in thinking about wanting to watch this movie. Is there any particular reason you picked this one?
I've been watching I watched a bunch of his other movies, of other Shinya Tsukamoto's other movies.
Hmm.
Um and they're really good. But I haven't watched Tetsuo in years. Maybe like a few years. And I love that movie. So I thought it was a good chance to kind of revisit that movie. Um and you haven't seen it, so and there's nothing like it, really.
Yeah, I'm completely unfamiliar with this filmmaker, with this film. It sounds very strange, very odd. It's giving me just reading the description here, a metal fetishist driven mad by
Yeah.
the maggots wriggling in the wound he's made to embed metal into his flesh, runs out into the night and is accidentally run down by a Japanese businessman and his girlfriend. I don't know why the first thing that came to my mind was like Videodrome, some Cronenberg kind of style stuff. I don't know how true that's gonna be, but it's definitely it seems
Yeah. You'll
interesting,
see. You'll see.
weird. Yeah, I'm
You'll
excited.
see. Good.
It's definitely gonna be an interesting experience. But this week we watched Secrets and Lies,
Yep.
which
I've got two words for you, by the way.
two
I'm not
words.
even
What do you
gonna
got?
I got two words for you just to like start off the conversation. I got two words for you to sum up this movie, besides Secrets and Lies, the title of the movie. I've got two words for you. Timothy Spall. Timothy Spall is he is so fucking good in the movie. He blew my mind how good he was. I couldn't believe he plays, of course, the great character Maurice.
Hmm.
Absolutely like one of the greatest characters like of any movie ever. He's so awesome. And he's one of those guys, he's got kind of like this sort of like he's got a crazy look.
He does.
He people I think mostly know him from more kind of like more newer fantasy stuff like Harry Potter movies and
100%.
Sweeney Todd and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Because he kind of has this almost like mouse rat-like quality to him.
Oh yeah.
But in this movie, it just shows how good of an actor he is. He like totally like turns it up. I just wanted to bring him up like first and foremost because I was really blown away by his performance, but really I was blown away by everyone. You know, this movie, of course, is very like play like, it's very actory. But when it comes to kind of like this kitchen sink drama stuff, I mean, this is probably as good as you're gonna get.
Yeah, it is very an actored forward film, and it puts a lot of pressure on the actors to give these really strong performances because there's not a whole lot to hide behind here. I mean, it's some incredible writing here, and I think the editing, especially when you talk about those first couple of scenes, is absolutely brilliant. And I think what's so wonderful about the editing, and it's not something that would go on, to win an Oscar for editing because it's not flashy editing. We're not talking some like big actiony movie in which you have all these different shots cut together really quickly, but rather just very thoughtful and intriguing editing. I mean, you think
Yeah,
about those first scenes, right? You go from a funeral to a
right.
wedding to children to I think it's
I don't even know. It's just like, but no, I know where you're coming from. The movie doesn't rely on any like I don't know, filmmaking tricks or story tricks in terms of like there's no like it's just straightforward the story from beginning to
mhm,
end. It's over kind of a relatively short period of time.
yeah.
There are no flashbacks, there's no montages, there's not a lot of music in the movie. There is some music in the movie at
Hmm.
very opportune times. Like I'm thinking about the music that they cue right before she at the barbecue at the birthday party
Yeah.
confesses that Hortense is her daughter. There's like sometimes like the music will kind of play into kind of sort of signify like a shift,
Hmm.
which I think is okay. Um, and yeah, like I think yeah, basically what you were saying is yeah, that is just straight up drama, kitchen sink drama, people talking. Just people sitting around talking, drinking tea, and drinking a lot of booze.
And one of the things that I really love about this film, and I think of all the films we've watched, and we've watched a lot of films for the podcast, and we've both watched just a lot of films in general because we are a couple of freaks, but this definitely is perhaps one of the closest writing styles to my own work, to the way I write films, which is what it's what I aspire to in a lot of ways, because what makes the writing of this film so incredible, and there is this play-like quality to it, is that it has absolutely no interest in spending time trying to explain to you what's going on. And it's not that what's
Yes,
going on is confusing. I mean, especially towards the beginning, because there's a lot of characters, you're playing catch up a little bit, but every single
that's
scene
great.
starts off in which these are people who have clearly known each other for a very long time. And it's
Yes.
not, I'm this person and I'm this person and I work here, right? You're forced
Yep.
to just, it's as if you were thrown in the, it's almost like
You accept,
documentary-esque,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're like totally thrown into that situation, right? Again, there's no flashbacks, right?
Hmm.
And so this is especially noticeable in the relationship between the sister and brother, right?
Yeah.
Like when that scene when he goes to like check on her and he's like looking at the leak and stuff like that and she like breaks down. That's such a great charged, like supercharged scene where even though it's just, it's just two actors that are reciting lines and they're talking, it really does feel like two people that have had like a huge, long amount of history between each other.
Hmm. And we talk about that Timothy Spall performance, which, by the way, it's weird of all the act. I mean, a lot of very familiar actors, a lot of actors who've done a lot of things, a lot of very famous actors, but Timothy Spall, especially because it's so ingrained in my mind from things like Harry Potter and having, because he has such a specific face, such a specific image. Me personally at least, have these very specific ideas of him as kind of right. You build these ideas of who these people are, of these actors,
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
certain expectations, and just to give this incredible performance that is so different than a lot of the work he does just shows his range, and of course my own constrained ideas of who this person is as an
Yeah.
actor, and so it's almost the experience is a little strange because you kind of have to shift your own mindset because you have right, as someone who has seen him in so much stuff and consumed so much of him as a specific type of character because he looks a
Yeah.
certain way and so he
Yeah. These
plays
British
a
actors.
specific character. But I think really the performance that blew my mind, and the first film I thought of, which I put in my letterbox review, was Woman Under the Influence, the Brenda
Yeah.
Blessin
Huh?
Lethan? I don't know how
What are
you
you talking
pronounce
about?
uh the person who
Huh?
plays the mother
Oh,
in
gotcha.
Flesh
Okay.
is
Yeah.
right. Brenda's
Yeah. She's
character.
really crazy. She is like a very like shrill voice. So it's kind of hard to listen to her sometimes. Yeah, but she's really good. Everybody's really good. Marianne John Baptiste.
Hmm.
That shot of her at the beginning of the funeral where she's crying. Oh, what a great that really moved me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was a very moving part of the movie, and I don't even know who it is yet. It's just right. Like he's doing so like yeah, the way that he's able to kind of like really kind of easily. Mike Lee is who I'm talking about here, the writer
Yeah.
and director. The way he's able to like easily and seamlessly kind of like create kind of like this like world um and these like people and these like families and stuff like that like it's so confident, it's so yeah, it's just like it just exudes so much like confidence and yeah.
Yeah, and I think often as storytellers, when we talk about world building, we kind of get obsessed with sci-fi and fantasy and these very specific, weird, strange worlds. But I think it's important to note that world building is built in every film because film isn't, even a documentary, it isn't reality. It's this version of reality that we have created, and they're all different, they're all weird. And every writer and storyteller and director has their own specific way of telling this story. And I think Mike Lee has this incredible ability to build this world very quickly without a lot of dialogue. I mean, I was counting it while watching the film, just how long it takes before there is any dialogue or any dialogue of meaning. I mean, just how much story is told just through images, just through right
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
the shots of the funeral, the wedding, the children playing, uh,
Or the
the
way that people, or the way at least like people, or the way that he also directs actors, the way that they talk to each other, the way that they look at each other, or react to
Mhm.
each other, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about this being like a very actorly movie, which it very
It
much
is.
is, and it very much leans on the dialogue, but even just the visuals themselves without being very flashy. I mean, I don't know if there's really a whole lot of moments in here I'm like, wow, what an incredible shot. You know, how did they get that? But just so incredibly patient. I think the moment where uh, Mortiz, Hortis? No,
Hortense.
Hortense, sorry.
Hortense
It's a very,
Cumberbatch.
very, very British. That is such a British name.
Yeah, that
Uh,
is crazy, that
it's
name.
crazy, crazy
Even
British.
even the characters in the movie are like, kind of like, what?
So even the diner scene with Hortense and Cynthia where they're sitting on the same side of the table. I mean, that shot goes on for a significantly long time, just the two of
Oh,
them
the
sitting
diner
there
scene
talking.
is a
hmm
crazy scene. It's one of the craziest scenes in
I
the
mean, I
movie.
just feel so uncomfortable, and like
Yeah, it's
you can
crazy. It's a long
feel
shot.
Hortense's just like because of course it would be incredibly uncomfortable to meet this
Yeah,
person who is your mother and you've never spoken to before, and Cynthia is very much trying to keep the fact that Hortense is her daughter a secret, and no one really talks about it. They kind of talk around it. I mean, thinking of
right.
the of also incredible scene and talking about how another just like amazing world building moment and how they talk around things is that moment where Cynthia goes to an adoption agency or what have you, right? She or
Yeah.
the social worker, and she has that conversation with her.
That scene is fucking awesome too. That's okay. So like the social worker scene, and I wonder if this is like a I wonder if other Mike Lee movies are like this where the social worker scene is very interesting because like that just like that scene and other scenes in Secrets and Lies goes to show again how confident Mike Lee is because that social worker scene and then maybe like that other scene with where Hortense is hanging out with her friend
Yeah.
and that scene where the guy that Maurice bought the business from shows up randomly like he is able to like kind of like invent these one-off characters that show up just for this one scene. You
Yeah.
never see them again. They're never even like even brought up again in the whole movie,
Nope.
but they're able to show up for this one scene, provide what that scene needs, and they're able to stick out, give a great performance. They say some amazing things, they do some amazing things. Like the social worker scene, like you said, is fucking awesome. That actor, I think, is very famous actually, and she's very good. Like there's something so realistic about her performance.
Yeah, these characters just even characters again that are only there for one scene. I mean, you think of the character for that comes in that used to own the business. I mean, it is just such a well developed character for I mean, you could definitely get away as a lazier filmmaker by just sort of stamping the traditional kind of crazy person or like this person or that person, right? Kind of just put them into this bubble and be like, this is the kind of character you are, go do your thing and just go do it because they're only there for one scene, because they're there for such a short amount of time. But instead, to have these characters that are incredibly well developed even though they're only
Yeah,
there for a couple of minutes, is
that's
just
crazy
it,
to
it
do
just
that.
shows like the talent and brilliance of Mike Lee and his writing ability and his ability to tell a story and ability to create characters that feel like real human beings. I mean, there's a lot of this film
Crazy.
that feels very documentary-esque, that feels as if we are spying on this people, and you feel almost a little icky, a little uncomfortable that
Yep.
you shouldn't be here, that like it's weird how it tricks you into thinking that this isn't a piece of fiction. This isn't a movie. This is something that's actually happening in real time and we're experiencing it and you can feel all of the just how uncomfortable it is and just how much you kind of want to help them, right? And you wanted things to be better. And what I
Yep.
love about that social worker scene, the tension is built because the typical thing to be would be to immediately like say, "Oh, this is a social worker's office. She's looking for a daughter." Blah blah blah, and the
Yeah.
tension would be, how's she going to do that? But the tension of this scene instead is built for a very long time in this scene. It is it is never said outright what why she is there, what she is doing, And as a viewer, you have your assumptions, right? You can assume things about it,
Yeah.
and you you start to kind of gather evidence. Okay, I think this is happening. I think this is happening. But it's not until almost the end of that scene, which I mean is 5, 10, 15 minute scene, that you are actually given any evidence that what she's doing there is to find her daughter. Like
Yeah.
the fact that he is willing and forces you, and as a viewer, you have to, I mean, it's just, it's so much respect for the viewer to be like, I'm not going to explain this to you. I'm not going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out on your own. And it's work. It's not easy. It's not one of those films that you can kind
Yeah.
of
There's
just
nothing.
sit back and
Yeah.
just let come over you. It's definitely one of those films that you have
Yeah.
to
Pay attention.
actively be involved in, right? You have to pay
This is one of
attention.
those movies too where it's like I don't like usually putting on subtitles for English language movies. I put on
Hmm.
the subtitles for like this movie though. Like
Yeah.
yeah, because it's like at least like the small type just to have
Mhm.
it there just in case like I've missed something. Yeah, because yeah, you really don't want to miss what people are saying in this movie, especially.
Oh yeah, and there's just so much. It's so dense of a film too, right? I think I haven't gone and
Yeah.
done a second watch yet, but I think I'm gonna do a second watch very shortly because there is just so much hidden in here, right? There's just so much dialogue and subtext and things that
Hmm.
are very
Yeah.
easy to miss on a first watch, and I think it does.
And also just as yeah, things like about race and class and things like that too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely a bit of a maybe disconnect isn't necessarily the right word, but we are Americans watching right, a British film, and so
Yeah.
there's certain ideas and cultures and sort of ways that exist in the world that are a little different than the way they exist in America. I mean, obviously, there's still that very real sense of class and racism and all of the things
Yeah.
that surround that, but the way it functions maybe is a little different in the UK than it is in the United States.
Like class and race and stuff, yeah, they're probably the dynamics are a little bit different, but you know, they're similar, right?
Hmm.
Like kind of like the animosity, right, between there's like a bit of animosity, a class animosity with this brother and sister, right? Because the brother's very successful, he's got a nice house, but you know, the sister is still living in their dilapidated old, you know,
Hmm.
childhood home. And there's maybe like I don't even know, maybe not animosity, but there is a bit of tension, right, with Hortense, who is like kind of like sort of like an upper middle class, you know, doctor essentially.
Yeah, there's definitely I think one of the really interesting, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting relationships, which again, what's so incredible is these relationships, like Cynthia's relationship to her brother is so different than Cynthia's relationship to her other daughter and her relationship to Hortense and her relationship to her sister-in-law. And they're so specific relationships, right? There's moments in which
Yeah.
it is just them talking. And again, we don't get flashbacks. We're not getting moments of here's what, here's how I met this person. Here's how this is going. And you're thrown into the
Right.
middle of these conversations. And yet
Yeah.
you kind of know them, right? It's kind of as if you are walking into a family dinner of a family you've never met before.
Yep.
And within the hour, right, you know the dynamics of everyone because they've spent their lives living together and they act certain ways to each other. And so you know that
Yeah.
like Cynthia's relationship with her other daughter is very
Yeah.
contentious because uh, Cynthia sees herself in that daughter. She sees the mistakes that she has made, right? She sees her making decisions that she's very afraid that she's going to kind of go into the same place because her other daughter, uh, for a while, who we know as her only daughter, is she's working for the country, the state. She like picks up
Yeah.
garbage, right? She does
Yeah.
not have
She's
a
a
great
garbage
job.
woman.
She's living with her mom. Her boyfriend is just like some random
He's
guy.
he's scaffolding. He works in scaffolding.
Right, that's right.
Is it cold? Sometimes. Is it dangerous? Sometimes. It's a good movie too. The movie's of course very funny. It's got a nice cheeky, kind of dry British sense of humor.
100%. There's way like for I think we're talking a lot by like how serious this film is, and there is like a lot of serious and intense and dense moments, but it's also a
Yeah.
very funny movie, and not funny in the way of we're telling a lot of jokes and everyone's laughing, but just
It's not a Monty Python movie.
no, it's more of that like very dry British humor where it's kind of under the table. You kind of have to find it, but when you
I
see
was
it,
laughing. I was laughing at like relatable stuff too. Like stuff like I don't know, like when Maurice gets home from work. Maybe not relatable stuff, but stuff that I get. Like when Maurice like gets home from work and his wife is like totally upset because I think she's like supposed to be going through menopause, right? Or
yeah.
something like that.
Hmm.
And so she's like very upset, right? She's like moving. It's like I want a drink and da, 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 I want some milk. And they're like, like shifting around some stuff. And Maurice is like, well, he's very patient. He's a very patient man. One of the greatest male father figure characters in any movie ever. He's totally patient and stuff. And it's very that's a nice sweet scene, because he doesn't like argue or anything. He's just kind of like accepting of his wife's kind of condition. And I was laughing at that scene just because it's like it's not like a fucking like it's not like a joke,
Hmm.
like it's kind of sad, but there is something like his reaction is really funny of him being like, "Is there something I could do?" Like
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I think everyone in a relation in any sort of relationship with a partner has, especially like long-term partner who's someone who is, especially with someone who has lived with someone for long periods of time, there are those moments where you're just in a shitty mood, right? Or your partner's just in a shitty mood and there's not a good reason for it. There's not a
right,
whole lot of logic to it, but it's there. And as a partner, you kind of just have to be
yeah,
there and kind of like grit your teeth through it, right? It's such a I think this film has such a beautiful idea and writing and storytelling and way of
yeah,
representing love. Like I think it's an absolutely gorgeous and thoughtful way of looking at love in a way that I don't think a lot of films do look at love. I think it's very easy to
yeah,
have that very kind of sappy romantic idea, this perfectionist idea of love. But
hmm,
the truth is love is kind of this very weird, sticky thing that requires constant work. It isn't just kind of a one-time thing. I mean, not just the relationship between uh, the husband and wife, but the relationship between Cynthia and Hortense is such a fascinating relationship, and exploring like
yeah,
that, and that's like it's a very weird circumstance in which she loved her daughter and she gave her away because she believed that was best for her daughter, and
yeah.
then
She was 16,
she
like
was
16 or
right.
17, right? Like that's
Yeah, she was
crazy.
16 years old. She was a
And
she was a baby herself.
they also kind of they sort of hint that maybe the child the the act that led to the conceivement of the child was maybe not
Yeah.
maybe consent wasn't really like a part of it, so I can what I mean. So that also I think is right, but that's part of the movie, right, where everybody is kind of like by the end of the movie everybody is sort of like brought all their shit to the table, right, and they're
Mhm.
like this is who I am, like that's kind of what the movie's all about.
Yeah, it's and just that love of and just and I think part of the reason I think of A Woman Under the Influence or kind of I guess similar vibes was Cynthia, she's always doing what she thinks is best for her daughters, for her family. She legitimately thinks everything she's
Yeah,
doing is for the best of them. I think she is the least selfish character in here. And even though like some of the actions she does are clearly like from an outsider's perspective, they're bad ideas. Uh, they are not well thought out. Logically, they're not
yeah.
great.
Like when she like dumps the fact that Hortense, like at the
Yeah,
barbecue, it's like, ooh, like you see it coming. I mean, like when you're watching the movie, like
100%.
she's gonna confess to them at that point, and it's like, and she's getting like misty and stuff. It's like, oh no, yeah, no, and everybody again, like I swear to God, like, everybody's drinking booze. I guess I feel like that's a British thing, right? Like people just like love day drinking. They love drinking during the day. I guess what else are you gonna do there?
I mean, I don't know. I've never been to Britain. But it does seem like everyone drinks a lot in this film,
There's
and
nothing else to do.
there's nothing else to do other than drink a beer or a glass of wine, and yeah, I mean that whole like the moment she decides to invite her to the get together, which is kind of like it's the big final moment, right? It's the thing that everything's leading up to is this barbecue because which is actually interesting. I didn't think about this until right now, but
Yeah.
at almost the very beginning of it, I mean, the first conversation between the husband and wife, Cynthia's brother and her sister-in-law, one of I think the very first conversation that they have in the film is talking about how they haven't seen their niece in a really long time, and they want to have a birthday
Right.
party for her,
Yep. That's the first scene, which is interesting. Right. Yeah,
right?
that's true. Like, yeah. Like, yeah.
So that in many ways is sort of the inciting incident. It's the catalyst that sort of leads us to this final barbecue. Like this is kind of everything is moving in this direction, and I think for like the first 30 or 45 minutes because there are so many characters, because there are so many different storylines that are interweaving and going in different ways, it can be hard to figure out what exactly like where are we going with this piece? What's kind
Yeah.
of the end goal here, right? It just feels like there's all these different stories, and you have to, as a viewer, be willing to kind of stick with it and be like, we just need to be in this moment, like enjoy all of these amazing moments because they do end up right all crashing into each other and becoming
Yeah.
this one thing that intermix with each other, and it's like
Right.
drawing, right? It's like drawing a line for each of these characters, and they're all doing their own thing, right? They're all following their own stories, not just characters in different parts of the family, but even right, even husband and wives, brother and sisters, they're all kind
Yeah.
of doing their own thing. And then right, you've drawn all these lines, and you look at the piece of paper, and it's just like this giant mess, right? This just this combination of lines that are crisscrossing, and they all come together, and they're all meeting each other and talking to each other. And now at that final scene, like you can just feel the pressure of like boiling up, of just like getting hotter and hotter
Hmm.
and more tense. And you know this moment is going to happen. You know that the reveal that Hortense, her daughter, like you can tell, like the moment she's invited, it's like you know it's going to happen as a viewer. Like you know that's how movies work, and just waiting for that moment to happen. And then when it does, right, when the reveal does happen, and kind of like the different reactions from the different characters is so interesting because you have someone like her brother who pretty much already like he's basically guessed it. He
Yeah.
basically knows what's right. He basically knows what's happening. Like he's pretty sure versus like uh her other daughter who like completely unaware of the whole situation because like there's hints of it right throughout the film that uh right when she talks to her brother when the brother talks to his wife that there's this mysterious daughter that he had. They don't know anything about it. She didn't even know that her own daughter was black.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yeah, thought that maybe the father of the child was someone else, but it turned out to be, another person, obviously. But
Hmm.
yeah, like, yeah. So when they meet each other, they have that awkward thing where they're just like, oh, no, no, no. No, like, no, this can't be right. And then she realizes, like, oh, wait, yeah, you are my daughter. So yeah,
Oh, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I was just thinking of another amazing moment. The first time Hortense and Cynthia meet, like they're standing on the side of a street, which is like it is. We talk about things being relatable. Like nothing. This is like one of my biggest fears. Like I hate it more than anything else, which is when you go to meet someone you've never met before. Like you've talked to them
Ooh,
via phone
right.
or like social media or Discord or whatever, and you don't really know what they look like, and
Hmm.
you just expect to meet them at a place, and there's that thing where like you both know that you're there, you're both in that same space, and
Yeah.
you're just walking around like trying to figure out who that person is. Like what a
Yeah.
great and relatable and just something that
Yeah.
like every single person on earth has experienced before. Just that moment of going to a place, having no idea who this other person looks like, and just kind of hoping you run into them, and just that whole long experience of the two of them right running into each other, and then Cynthia being like, no, 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 you can't be my daughter. Like that doesn't make any sense. And then
Yeah.
like right the gathering of like, no, 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 like this is definitely the case. I'm definitely your daughter. Here's the paperwork, right? Here's the proof. And just the series of things, right? It takes to convince her that
Yeah.
that is her mother. uh yeah, I mean, it's such a and there is that exploration too of right Hortense being black, growing up in a black family, having a black adopted mother and father, and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, right? Growing
Right.
up within that community, and then suddenly, right, when she goes uh, to figure out right who her mother is, she's like, "There's no way, right? This is wrong, right? This
Right.
it's wrong. Like, there's no way my mother's white. Like, that doesn't make any sense."
Yeah, that doesn't make, yeah.
But they're like, "No, no, she's white," and then like having to right? Because like, what's more like of a British white person thing to do than like a barbecue? Like that's the epitome
That's
of
awesome.
of like, here's an introduction to my culture. I think of one of my coworkers, Denise. She's from East LA. Grew up in a community that was 98% not just Latino, but 98% Mexican and like
Mhm.
2% Salvador, right? So
Mm.
there's almost no English speaking people in this community, no white people in this community. And she moved to Reno like 15 or 20 years ago. So she's been living in Reno a long time. And my other coworker, Joey, who is like the whitest man you'll ever meet. And I mean, he's a nice guy. I love him to death, but
Yeah.
like just like literally the epitome of like what you think white is. Like that's him. And so she had never had Chipotle before. Uh, and so he bought her Chipotle on Wednesday, and he was talking about how like this is the strangest experience I've ever had because as a white man, I've never like appropriated someone's culture, bought it for them, and then like gave it to the person, like gave it to the original culture that had kind of created. Because like Chipotle is like Mexican food, quote unquote, and just watching Denise like just completely disappointed by the whole. I mean, she had very low expectations, but just
Mhm.
completely disappointed by the experience because right. And but in like in Joey's way, like Chipotle isn't Mexican food. Chipotle is like it's definitely it's like of the culture of like I mean, white people is, I don't know if it's necessarily the right word, right? But it's like it's a specific culture that isn't Hispanic. It's not Latino. And so to share that culture is like a weird and interesting experience. And so like them having the barbecue is just like the epitome of kind of that like British middle class. Like that just feels very
Mhm.
like British middle class, right? We're gonna sit in our backyard or they
Right.
call it garden, I think is like very common like term for utilizing the like backyard, which is beautiful like garden by the way, like a beautiful
Yeah.
backyard. And and they're just gonna go there and they're gonna grill some meat and they're just gonna sit around and talk and drink and I love it. I mean, I love everything about it. And also just like the incredibly awkward and very obvious lie that Hortense met uh
Yeah, they can
Cynthia,
barely
like they
keep it
worked
together.
together. They definitely could have come up with a better lie than that. Like it is not because like Hortense very quickly is like trying to in, reveal or trying not to reveal rather that she is an optometrist, right? She owns
Right.
her own optometry practice and
Yeah. Or she just works there. I don't think she owns it. I think she just works there, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe
I
I'm
don't know.
wrong.
Yeah, I mean you're probably right. I guess maybe my only assumption for the reason that she owned it is you only really see her ever at the optometry office. I remember the first time at the beginning, but maybe you see her once or twice there again. But she's only other than like the uh, secretary or executive assistant or whatever. She's the only person there. So I guess I myself was under the assumption, which there's no reason that I should assume that she owned the practice. But she is an optometrist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's true.
She's very wealthy, as any optometrist would be.
Yeah,
Or
she's a doctor.
right, she's a doctor. She works hard. She lives in like a nice apartment, and then also how they use setting and clothing to represent the very specific class structure of Britain, which I think like
Yeah.
America definitely has a class system and it definitely exists, but I think the British class system is even more defined for better or worse. And the use of set designs to kind of show
Yeah, the different houses,
the
that
different
just,
houses,
yeah,
right?
the difference. Yeah, there's a big
Like
difference.
her apartment versus the brother's apartment versus the dilapidated house. Like you, but it doesn't feel as if I think there's there's this thing which I've complained about before, where there's a lot of filmmakers that don't really grasp like middle class or poverty, and they have these very
Yeah.
like weird ideas of how it works, and like the way they represent it is like very odd. Um, but instead you have these things where like, no, these feel like all these settings, which great set deck, great set design. They look
Yeah.
like places people actually live, right? They feel like lived in homes. They don't feel like, uh, which I think you see in way too many movies, as if they just walk into a home that's for sale, right? They like they look like you bought them out of a catalog. These like there's so many items in these homes that just feel as if they've been lived in. I mean, there's stuffs on the shelves, there's photos on the walls. It feels like real places, real people live, which I think plays into the idea of this being sort of documentary-esque, because all these places just feel they feel like homes. They feel like
Yeah, they're
places that
crazy.
people have lived in for 20 or 30 years. And right going I mean going back to that scene where she's looking up at the water stain and the brother's like trying to help fix it, right? He's trying to help her. I mean, what just a powerful moment to talk about the death
Crazy.
of their father, right?
Yeah,
In
and
this
like all
very
and
roundabout
like the
way.
stuff and you know and that thing too, that scene is so good too because like they talk about a thing that I think a lot of people can relate to. I've never had to do it,
Yeah.
but they talk a lot about it throughout the movie at that scene and other scenes. Like, what do you do with the stuff like when, your loved ones die? Like do you leave it around? Do you get rid of it? Like Hortense's like brothers, they have like an argument about like the house, right? Like who's
Mhm.
gonna keep the house or whatever, like what are you gonna like all these like what are you gonna do with like the remains of your dead like loved ones? Like that is like a thing that comes up like often, I think, for most people, if not everyone.
Yeah, it's something that films definitely ignore and people don't really think about because they don't really want to think about, which I guess I've dealt with this a couple of times because of the death of my grandma, my grandpa, and my wife's grandfather, whose house we live in now, who right,
Right,
we
that's
lived
true.
with him in this house.
Yeah.
And the thing that we so often don't think about and you never really see in movies is I think in movies there's this idea that like someone dies, we put them in the grave, and that's kind of the end of it, which is like a
Right.
really nice and full circle kind of idea that, oh, someone passed away, we cry, we're sad, suddenly they're in a grave, and then we can move on with our lives. But the thing that makes death so hard, the thing that makes death just like, it just
Yeah.
kind of keeps hitting you is like we forget that everyone, no matter how much money or how little money they have stuff. And the thing
Yeah, they have
is
all this
like
shit.
when they die, all of that stuff, right? Something has to happen to that stuff. Like you either have to hire people to get rid of it, you have to get rid of it yourself, you have to figure out what you want to save, or you have to go through all of that. I mean, I think for me the biggest example is when we moved in here. I mean, this house was right. My wife's grandfather bought it a couple of years ago. We moved in a couple of weeks after he moved in here because we were waiting for our apartment. We moved to Reno before our apartment was ready. So we lived here for a couple of months, right? We lived in his house. This room that I'm in right now, my office, was the room that we were living in. We move out, we move into an apartment. He renovates the entire house. Right? Spends years literally living through renovation. He has tons and tons of stuff because he's spent 70 plus years gathering just all kinds of different knickknacks and gadgets and all kinds of different things, right? Just a house filled with stuff. And he passes away. And then we move into that house that we lived in years ago after he passed away. And at the time, it is filled with all of his stuff. And at this moment, we have to figure out what are we going to do with all of
Yeah.
the things that are
Oh,
his,
fuck.
right? And it's not like an easy I mean, some of it's just like, oh yeah, like we can throw this away, we can get rid of that. But it's the emotional burden that comes with every single item that he has owned, right? As people
Yeah.
who have loved him and cared for him have to ask ourselves like, is this something that we keep? Right? Is this something that is worth
Yeah.
keeping?
Should we throw this
Not because
away?
like necessarily it has any
Hmm.
inherent value, right? There's plenty of stuff that to most people, right, it has no use, right? It has no value. It's not something that you're gonna go
Yeah.
on eBay and sell for $10,000. It's like, $20 maybe. And to go through that process again and again and again, because you have to do it through every single object, is incredibly painful and hard and tough. And it's the part of death that we don't really talk about because it sucks, because you're basically reliving
Yeah.
that death over and over and over again. And it's just like death is, it's a lot of work. And we don't think that it's a lot of work because we want to think about, right, this person died, the funeral, it's over. But there's so many things involved after it. I mean, whether you're talking about like, maybe they have a savings account, maybe they have an IRA, maybe they have a
Right.
house, right? Maybe they have, and it's no easier, right? I think of like my grandfather who lived in an apartment and have a whole lot of stuff. Like it's still very hard because you're still having to go through that, right? Um, you're walking into, I mean, for my grandfather, he lived in that apartment for like 15 years, right? So it's 15 years being in the
Yeah.
exact same place and, having
It's
all those
crazy.
memories, especially as he passed when I was like 24, 25 years old. So he had lived in that same place since I was 10 years old. So all of my own memories of walking in that place, thinking about, I remember being 10 years old and kind of running around in the backyard in the
Yeah.
pond that was back there, right? I remember, spending the night there and like reliving all those memories because memories are so linked to a place. And then like the drama of like, which is like part of the reason why she still lives in that dilapidated house is because like there is a sense of abandonment if you leave that place, right? Like you can still like part of the reason she holds on to that stuff is because in a way he's still there, right? Her father is still alive.
Yeah.
She kind of latch on to that idea and leaving that, getting rid of that stuff, leaving that
Yeah.
house. That's in many ways it's leaving those memories, right? Memories are so much attached to things and places and moments, and that is a really tough thing. And so like it's this very dangerous cyclical circle where getting rid of the stuff, right, is very painful in the moment and it feels like you're abandoning them. But by not getting rid of it, you're constantly reminded of their death. So, right there's
Yeah.
no good solution here. There's no good answer.
No.
But she's perpetually in pain because of this. I mean,
Yeah.
you think of her life before she meets Hortense, and it's not great, right? Her life is not great. Her daughter basically absolutely hates her. She doesn't go anywhere. She doesn't really do anything. She's kind of hidden herself off in the world. Uh, Her relationship with her brother is it's not great. It's not fantastic at the beginning of this film, and it's only from the disruption of Hortense that she kind of right. She finds a reason to live again. I mean, honestly, right? She finds a reason like to do something with her life, to be more than just right, this person who just works at a factory and does these things. And I think it's like I don't know if this is a British thing or if this is just a thing that's really like specific to this film, but like their relationship to work is really interesting and very different, I think, than the relationship as an American we have to work, or like American films have to work, in the sense that like in an American movie, someone's work in many ways like defines their life. It defines who they are as a person. I mean, even just as an American, when you go and meet a new person, one of the first things you ask them is like, what do you do for work, right? What is your work? Like it is so much a definition of who you are as a person. But there, even though like we see them actively working, we see their different jobs, I mean, even like the brother who has a successful photography business, like he doesn't identify himself as a photographer, right? That is not his identity. It is just something that he does during the day. And that's such an interesting and different relationship to work. And there is a lot of like exploration of work and what work means and like why we do what we do and why we work. And so kind of that juxtaposition, not necessarily shown in the film, but just the juxtaposition of like my own life and being an American and seeing that relationship to work in which it is something that they do, but it is not how any of them define themselves. I mean, even right, even Hortense, the optometrist, like other than that opening scene, we really don't ever see her doing optometry, right? We never see her. She almost never really talks about it until she's caught in the line near the end of,
Yeah.
right, revealing that she's an optometrist. And right, Cynthia, who works at the factory, do we ever see her like actually at the factory
At the very beginning.
at the very beginning? Right. And I think that's true with all of them. Like we almost never see them at their job. We almost never see them doing their thing, almost never talking about their job. I mean, the only one that really, I suppose, a bit talks about it is, of course, Timothy Spall, the brother, and I think that's more so because of the money that lies behind it, right? There's this really contentious, great moment where Cynthia is talking to her brother, and she has this sort of resentment because after the father passed away, right, there was a bit of money that it seems that she gave to him so he could buy the business, right? He could start the business. Uh, and it also plays in this idea of like how class is there's very much luck involved, right? Like for
Yeah.
better or worse. That's just how capitalism works, right? We like to think it's like, oh, you just put in the hard work and everything
Yeah.
turns out, right? The more hard work you put in, the more
Right.
money you're going to make. But like it's very clear from this film that Mike Lee is very aware that class is something that is built first off generationally,
Yeah.
and a whole lot of luck is involved, and that's not always the case, right? You think of like Hortense the optometrist, um, right? She's a doctor, she works hard, she makes good money, but like so much, especially if you're not in a field like like the medical field. Like if you're outside the medical field,
Yeah.
basically you're kind of just you fumble into it, whether it's wealth or not. And the people who make it, rarely is it because they're working harder than everyone else, right? Mark Zuckerberg isn't, he didn't just work harder than everyone else, right? There's a whole lot of luck involved,
Yeah.
right? That made him a billionaire and all these billionaires and millionaires, and even just like the tiny bit of differences, right, between like middle class and like slightly lower middle class or like lower class. Uh, like these differences are so small and so minute. Like this one little thing, right? The death of the father and the, however many couple $1,000s in which she gave to her brother to start this business, like led to him having a successful business where he has, I think, doesn't the sister-in-law at some point she's going through like a tour of the house, right? And she's like, here's the closet, here's the bathroom. And I think at one point she like shows the garage and she's like, here's our car. And Cynthia goes, well, I thought you had a different car. She's like, yeah, we got a new car. She's like, but didn't your old car work? She's like, yeah, but now we have a new one, right? It's just like,
Yeah. They like did multiple bathrooms. She's like using and it's sad because like yeah, she's using like her stuff as a replacement for kids because they can't have kids. Those are her children, her homes, her stuff.
yeah, that's another really interesting dynamic is because the brother and his wife they've always wanted kids, right? But they were never able to, right? And of course there is that great moment near the end, right, where she
Right.
reveals, even though like you expect it, you kind of you have your suspicions throughout the film, right? There's a whole lot of like hints and suggestions of it, but she never says it. They never reveal it towards near the end that she was incapable of having a child, and there is sort of that emptiness, right? They kind of treat their niece as this sort of long lost daughter because they were never able to have their own children. And so she definitely, uh, the sister-in-law uses stuff to fill the void
Yeah.
because I think
It's
too,
sad.
like she doesn't work, right? She's like a
Hmm.
stay-at-home. I mean, I
Think
guess
so.
not a stay-at-home mom because she's not a mother, but
She doesn't have to work.
she doesn't have to work, right? Because she kind of she's a wealthier, and so like her identity as a person, which I mean, I'm not saying that someone should like, especially someone who has recently become a father, right, in the last 9 weeks. I do not solely identify myself as a father, nor does my wife solely identify herself as a mother. And I think that is a very toxic way to identify yourself when you have children, is merely a mother or a father, because it puts a lot of unrealistic expectations on your child, which isn't fair to them. And if your identity is entirely like held by that, is a very dangerous place to live. But for her, she doesn't really have a way to identify herself, right? She doesn't have
Yeah.
sort of like an art, passion, work. And so like all of her identity goes into basically being an aunt, right? Into being like the best aunt she can be and being the best wife she can be because she she can't find her own identity. And I think that's like her big struggle with this film and why she's so angry because she feels like her life, right? She's wanted this thing. She's wanted to have a kid. She's wanted to be a mother, which is, a noble goal as any, right? To be a mother or a father, to be a parent of someone is just as great as anything else, and incapable of doing that. And there's not real right there's no like fair reason for it. I mean, just the
Yeah.
dichotomy of someone who, right, her sister-in-law who has a kid when she's 16 and gives it away, right, in her eyes, gives it away. Versus another person who's always wanted a child and can never have one, and seeing those dynamics like in the real world, like these are very like real things that happen to real people,
Hmm.
and like we see it right in our own lives, we see it in our own families, in which like there are definitely some people who love being parents a lot more than others, and some people who always want to be parents and for whatever reason, right, don't have that opportunity. And it's just like life kind of sucks sometimes, and it's not fair. And like right, this is not like one of those kind of peachy stories where everything is just like perfect. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's a depressing. I think we come out of the movie feeling like better about it. I do certainly like better about myself or like
It's
the
not a
human
depressing
race.
ending.
No, it's not a depressing ending at all, but there are definitely like a lot of challenging things about it, but they're like it never feel forced, right? It never feels like drama for the sake of drama. Like all these moments, especially near the end when you have this giant eruption where they all are in the room, right? For the first time in the whole film, you've put everyone who you've seen throughout the film, you put them all in one room together. And there are all these explosions, right? All these revelations
Yeah.
of who these people are, all these secrets and lies, Andrew,
Yeah.
are revealed. And it doesn't feel as if this is drama for the sake of drama. These feel like real people living real lives, and you're with them in that moment, and you're ready for it. And of course, there's that moment because one of the strangest relationships, which would have to be just like an odd relationship, right? The relationship between Hortense and the other daughter, like they're half sisters, and they've never met before. And like, of course, that relationship would be contentious, especially at this point, because like Cynthia's developed this very specific relationship with Hortense, which is kind of it's a strange relationship because she is kind of acting as a mother, but then like they're also only 16 years apart, and so like they're also kind of friends too, and so it's kind of it's a weird relationship because she wasn't there for her childhood, right? She wasn't there to kind of be a mother, quote unquote, so kind of in the more traditional fashion. And so that versus her relationship with her actual daughter, who they do not have a good relationship. And so like there is that jealousy a little bit of the her real daughter, right? Her second daughter has for Hortense because she doesn't have the relationship and she's angry about it. But then like Hortense on the
Yeah.
opposite end, she's also angry because she feels like she was abandoned, right? I'm pretty sure at one point in the film, she's like, right, who gives away their daughter? Right, you can't love your daughter if you're giving them away, which, I think she grows to not necessarily believe that. But I mean, I can understand why someone would feel that way as an right if you were adopted to feel a bit abandoned, even though like you may love your adopted parents. She had a great adopted parents, but especially because I mean she didn't know she was black, right? She didn't even look
Yeah.
at her daughter like when she was born.
Right.
Like that is such
That's
an intense thing to learn. And that final
yeah.
moments, or like towards the end of the film, where the sisters or half sisters come together and kind of realize that even though they come from these very different backgrounds, they've lived these very different lives. They're currently living these very different lives, to kind of come together and just find a sense of kinship and a connection. I think is really it's intense and powerful, and
Yeah.
it definitely touches me. Like I was very moved
Hmm.
by that moment when they're in the garden shed, and
Hmm.
they're kind of just they're
Yeah.
because it's not fixed, right? It's not like, oh, we're sisters now, we love each other. It's kind of like
Yeah.
this
There's
is the
still
relationship
issues.
that we're going to explore. um and that's one of the things I love about the end of this film is everything's not just kind of tied up in a knot, right? Happily ever after, we move on. It's definitely like these are lives that are going to go on living, and but we as like viewers, right? We have to walk away from it, and we don't know what happens, right? There's no sequel, right? Secrets and Lies 2, More Secrets, More Lies. Uh, we're kind of left just like with all of these open-ended questions, with all these moments of of closure, yes, because right, we had this explosion, we had all these things happening, but now it's like all these new relationships have formed. What's going to happen next? And we don't get those answers, right? There's no epilogue in which it's 50 years later and we get to see all these people's lives later. It's these people are going to go on living their lives, and it leaves me as a viewer kind of just like thinking about like, oh, I wonder what would have happened like after this, right? Like, what does the relationship look like 10 years later between
Right.
Hortense and her sister? What does it look like with her mom? Like, what happens when, the mom passes away? What happens when, all these different other things happen? So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that necessarily, but it's just a lot of very powerful
Mhm.
moments in this.
Yep. Should we wrap it up?
We should wrap it up. Yeah. And
Okay. Good.
I did a little rapping, so maybe you should go first and I'll kind of come
Yeah,
to.
I mean, like, I mean, I love the movie. I think it's great. I think I'm gonna give it like a good like 8 out of 10. Although I think it could be bumped up in the future. Yeah, like as long as you're paying attention, listening, you can really, 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 just like really feel this movie. It has such kind of like a warmness to it. It can be really sad and miserable, but it has this like beautiful, warm, happy moments too, like you were talking about. And yeah, again, I just find a movie like this like it's not necessarily a movie I want to go out of my way to watch all the time, like not every
Yeah.
day, but again, this is probably the best like, type of this is probably like one of the best films of this type. Um, and it is nice to watch one of these movies because it is like taking it is work, but it does kind of reset things a little bit. It's good
Mhm.
to watch a 2.5 hour kitchen sink drama sometimes, just so you can kind of like really kind of take in like all the human emotion and power and just all the stuff going on, so again, it requires work, but it I don't know. Yeah, I really like this movie and it's funny and despite its length, it is really good all the way through. So yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10 for sure.
Yeah. I I've been thinking about this idea a lot lately because I've been working a lot on my film these last. I mean, hell, I've been working on this film almost since we ended, like within weeks of ending Sir Mel Hayes. So it's been for almost 5 years now of thinking about this film, researching this film, writing this film, shooting this film, and now in post production. And we're getting near the end of this film that I've been working on for so long. I put so many hours. I mean, I've put almost 1,000 hours into this film, and just all the different people involved in the making of this film, from the writing of the film, from help shooting the film, with sound design, music, and it's definitely. I mean, I think about. I don't know why I've been thinking about Sir Mel Hayes a lot lately too, but think about how quickly, right, we made Sir Mel Hayes. I mean, from the writing to production, post production, we got like the whole thing done in under a year, which is incredible and amazing. And thinking about just like how much longer, More Beautiful Than Death has been as a project. And the only reason I'm bringing that up and thinking about it a lot lately is because I think about the difference between a good film and a great film. And I think there are thousands of good films on there. And I think we've done a lot of good films for the podcast. I think we've done some great films for the podcast. I think the thing for me that separates a good film from a great film is when I watch a good movie, whether I've gone to the movie theater, I've watched it at home, we've watched it for the podcast, what have you. A good movie, we can come on, we can talk about it. Um, we can talk about all the things that we liked, like, oh, there's cool camera movements, there's cool editing, there's cool writing, great performances, whatever you want to say about it. And I can be impressed with it, I can be very impressed with it. But at the end of the day, like, I had a good time with it, and maybe I'll want to watch again. Maybe I'll want to watch it 10 more times. I don't even think it has to do with the watchability of it. I think the real separation is a great movie is
Mhm.
when I watch a great movie, I feel like I am a different person, at least the first time. And I would argue probably every time I watch a great movie, I'm a different person than who I was at the beginning of this film. And I think
Mhm.
that truly is the magic of cinema. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to be cheesy about it, but I legitimately think I was watching an interview with David Cronenberg one of your favorite directors, the other day, and he was talking about watching movies on your phones, right? Watching a movie on an Apple Watch, and he's like, I cinema isn't watching movies. Cinema isn't the release of movies in the theater, which is a really this is a really interesting view of cinema. It's not like the release of a movie into theaters, going to watching a movie, that's not cinema. Cinema is the making of a film. Like that is cinema. And how you watch it in Cronenberg's mind is like that's not what the experience is about, which is like this really weird and intriguing and interesting way. And it makes me think about like just how like the power of cinema is that it can change the way we view the world for the better, right? It can fundamentally change our own minds. It kind of puts us in this different place. And it's the same thing with like a great piece of art or a great novel. It's like you are a different person after you have had that experience. And I do think that's the case with this film. I do think that I was a different person going in this film than I was coming out of this film. And I mean, I think I've made very clear through this podcast episode that I very much enjoyed it. I think it's some beautiful writing, incredible direction, great performances, great storytelling. So I'm going to give this one a medium to strong 9 out of 10.
Cool.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Andrew, R-E-T-R-0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.